Stepping onto the deck of the USS Ronald Reagan is like getting a front row seat to US military strategy in the Middle East. We're just off the coast of Iran on a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier packed with the latest military hardware. There are more than 5,000 US servicemen and women on board. It costs $1 million a day to operate this ship. The US Navy now keeps 2 carriers in the region at all times. There are dozens of aircraft on this carrier. Most of them are fighter jets like this, running operations in Iraq and Afghanistan and throughout the Middle East. And the sense that people have here is that not only is this a mission to support allies of the US throughout the region by reassuring them there is a solid military footprint here, but also as a stern reminder to adversaries of the US also that the US military isn't far away.
Just our presence alone out here, us, having our military ground forces, having our air support and everything sends a very strong message to, the enemy over there, saying that we are here and we are ready to strike and support our ground troops, if necessary. So, very big role.
It's about 44 nautical miles to Iran.
From where we are here?
Right, from where we are right now.
Okay. The bridge of the ship is where potential threats to the shipping lanes are monitored. Sailors here are constantly on the lookout.
There's tankers, there's cargo vessels, there's dhows, lots of vessels out there. A very vital area of the world that plenty of folks are using it for plenty of different purposes.
The ship's stated mission is using air support to protect US troops on the ground. But it's also here to protect the US economy by keeping energy flowing through the Straits of Hormuz. This is a particularly challenging stretch of water to navigate. Not only is it one of the busiest oil export channels in the world, but on one side you have the coast of Iran, and less than 150 nautical miles away, the coast of Saudi Arabia. In the middle, the USS Ronald Reagan, acting as a buffer. 2 regional superpowers, one a US ally, the other a sworn enemy of Washington, with billions of dollars of oil shipments flowing in between. The USS Ronald Reagan is almost like an insurance policy for the energy markets.
To withdraw from that space, particularly where precipitously, would be a real game changer.
Given the turmoil in the region, I think it settles things down and reduces the risks of open military conflict between nations.
It would be more important than the United States one day withdrawing from Iraq or Afghanistan. This would be a very big deal indeed for the oil markets.
You think it sends a message to have that kind of militarized presence?
Yeah, I think it does. I think everybody takes note of it, and they realize that they couldn't take military action without first thinking about and fearing the consequences. And I think that's good.
Demonstrations in the Gulf haven't been confined to Bahrain. People have taken to the streets in Iraq, Oman, Kuwait, and in early March, in eastern Saudi Arabia, where the majority of the country's oil reserves are located. In and around the city of Qatif, protesters marched demanding democratic reforms. As in Bahrain, they were mainly from the Shia community, a minority in Saudi Arabia. Also, as in Bahrain, security forces opened fire on crowds. King Abdullah, now 87 years old, has responded with the carrot as well as the stick, simultaneously launching a $100 billion spending program, as well as a brutal crackdown.
I think, though, Saudi Arabia itself faces a choice in terms of reform or trying to clamp down on any dissent. I think that's a very stark choice it has. If they pursue a more security-led approach, is what we've seen in Bahrain right now and what we've seen in parts of the kingdom, I fear that the response may well then be something which is more sinister for the Saudi leadership.
The Saudi government denied fault lines permission to enter the country. So we tried to meet some of those who'd been protesting outside Saudi's borders. The borders between these Gulf countries are often right in the middle of the desert. There's often no real delineation between one country and the next. We're right now headed to the frontier with Saudi Arabia over these dunes. We've arranged to speak with some Saudi Arabian dissidents about the situation in that country. On this occasion, they weren't able to cross the border, saying it was too dangerous. So we rigged up a satellite to speak to them over the internet. How big are these protests?
Every village, maybe they can reach 300 to 400 people. But once it was the biggest one during the protests. It was after the Saudi army get to the Bahrain. It reached 5,000 people in Al Qatif. And I know there is so many people want to go out and want to shout for their rights, but they can't. Even they are afraid, or they can't guess what the Saudi government will do for them.
Do you feel that the authorities are watching and are trying to resist any spreading of this protest?
They always feel dangerous from the Shia. They are always afraid that we are just as soldiers of Iran. We are not.
You know, the interdynamics of the country is changing. There are difficulties. The government really failed to redress these difficulties. For instance, unemployment, poverty, alienation of different groups.
What are you calling for? What's your ultimate objective?
If people could have a voice and a choice to elect their officials, their representative that could scrutinize the government, could limit the authority of the royal family, this is our ultimate goal.
But that goal still seems far off. People we spoke with didn't anticipate any real reform soon. And for the US, support for the House of Saud means a counterweight to Iran, clamping down on funding for Al-Qaeda and maintaining a free flow of oil.
Those are real interests. You can't disregard them. You can't just sweep them aside and say they don't mean anything. I think in the real world, as governments make decisions, governments will balance these interests. And sometimes the balance will be in favor of the geopolitical interests, and sometimes the balance will be in favor of the political or democratic interests.
Right now, there's nothing to say about Saudi Arabia, and it's really unclear what's going to happen. What I think is important is that Saudi Arabia not become the center of a counter-revolution. I think that doesn't serve Saudi's interests, and it certainly doesn't serve the interests of the region.
So it is with great confidence and faith in our future that I welcome the President of the United States, Barack Obama.
When Barack Obama made his speech in May outlining the US position on the historic changes in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia didn't even get a mention. But he did mention Bahrain.
Nevertheless, we have insisted both publicly and privately that mass arrests and brute force are at odds with the universal rights of Bahrain citizens.
On our last night in Manama, we watched the speech with a member of the largest opposition party in Bahrain. Al-Wafaq has had 2 of its members imprisoned since the crackdown. It's recently pulled out of talks with Bahrain's rulers, saying they're not serious about reform.
I believe that the American, they have, like all other people, they don't want to anger their friends or their closest regime.
For Syed, and for many people living in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia who've taken huge risks by taking to the streets, the issue is that President Obama's words have been selective, supporting protester-led uprisings in some parts of the Arab world, but not others.
In Cairo, we heard the voice of the young mother who said, "It's like I can finally breathe fresh air for the first time."
The United States foreign policy and national security interests are, well, they're dictated by precisely that, our national interests. So a lot of these remain consistent over time.
In Sana'a, we heard the students who chanted, "The night must come to an end."
For the last 50 years, there's been, an unspoken, unholy alliance between us and the Arab autocrats. They sell us oil, at too high a price, and we provide them with arms. That can't be the deal into the future.
In Benghazi, we heard the engineer who said, "Our words are free now. It's a feeling you can't explain."
In some countries, you've seen the United States stand up very clearly for values and for human rights and for democracy. In other instances, we've seen the United States act to protect, in essence, and defend the status quo.
In Damascus, we heard the young man who said, after the first yelling, the first shout, you feel dignity.
In Bahrain, we heard the protesters who had the courage to call for change. It's a call that's being silenced while America watches on, mindful of its interests in this part of the Middle East.